Good morning, Cincinnati! All righty now. Is there an electrical engineer in the house? Yeah, you have to actually squiggle the little squiggle things. Don't we have a color book on this? I think there is. I think it's like the tangerine. That's all. So you knew if you were coming to Cincinnati, there had to be some person during the 2 days that would show you a slide that had the cast and crew. Well, not that. You're looking ahead. Apparently, I got to be neighbors. They have a cast and crew of WKRP in Cincinnati on it, right?
Right.
So I grew up watching WKRP in Cincinnati. Now I'm going to make you all feel very, very old for a moment. Do you know when this show was on television?
Yes.
Ah, you are smart, yes. It ran for 4 years, from 1978 to 1982, my friends. It's over 30 years old. So, you know, I've seen every episode of WKRP in Cincinnati. And as I prepared for our brief time together today, I tried to think about what my favorite episodes was. And I couldn't do it. There's actually 2 of them. So one of my favorite episodes is so horrific, I almost don't know how to share it with you, but we'll try anyway. It was a Thanksgiving Day episode. And what the director of sales, Herb Harlech, decided to do was have a big event at a local shopping mall. So they sent out like announcements, and people gathered at the shopping mall. And they didn't actually show this happening. What they showed was back at the radio station, the other people clustered around like a speakerphone, listening to like a live broadcast from the site. So it's much more horrible. And apparently what happened there was Herb and Les Nessman, the weatherman, showed up in a helicopter that circled over the mall. And the thought was to share live turkeys with the people on the ground. So they started shoving the turkeys out of the helicopter.
They were frozen.
Oh, I think they were frozen too. I can just remember the scene afterwards, and you know, they're back at the station. I said, "Yo, God is my witness. I thought turkeys could fly." So that was a good one. But you know, there was actually one more episode of WKRP in Cincinnati that actually has had a very big impact on my professional life. And of course, I didn't know it at the time. But in this particular episode, the salesman for the WKRP radio station, who's Herb Harlech, he wears a big white belt, and he wears pretty much a complete rainbow collection of plaid suits. He's in the hospital for something like having an appendix removed or a sharp fin put on or something like that. Doesn't matter what it is. But he's unavailable to sell advertising time for the radio station. So Andy, who's the program director, says, "How hard can it be to be a salesperson? I can, Herb's not that good. I can certainly step in to do it." So he slicks the hair back, he puts on a suit, and Andy goes out to sell radio time. Well, Herb gets out of the hospital, he comes back and he sits down with Andy and says, "So, I've been out for a while, how'd things go?" And Andy says, "Your job's not that hard. I went out and did all your selling for you." And Herb says, "Wow, that's great. Could you tell me who you sold to?" And he says, "Well, there's this furniture guy, and I sold him like $5,000 worth of advertising." And Herb says, "That's great. He buys $10,000 of advertising every week." And his face sort of falls. He says, "Well, there's this other guy who runs like a convenience store, but I must have met with him like 12 times, but I could never get him to buy, and in the end his mom, passed on, and so he wasn't willing to buy this week." Herb says, "Well, his mom dies every month, okay? So, I will go talk with him, I'll get it fixed, I'll get it all taken care of." What happened, what came out of that episode was, Herb was a sales creature. He was different from everybody else, but he was actually really good at doing his job. He knew his customers and he knew how to sell. So throughout my career, I've bumped into salespeople, and I have thought, these guys are clowns. Really? Come on. Look at how they dress, look how they talk, they've got those gold bracelets on, come on. But because of WKRP and because I've been smart enough to at least hold my tongue and see what happens. And more often than not, I've been pleasantly surprised. They've closed the deal, they've got the customers, they sold the product. Apparently, I don't know everything. That was a little bit of an eye-opener for me. So look, if I can remember things that happened on TV 30 years later, then it's fair to say that watching WKRP in Cincinnati changed my world. Now, the interesting thing about changing your world is that sometimes other people can change our world for us. When I got out of college, I was ready to change the world. Watch out, here I come. I went to work for McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Company in St. Louis. I was working on the U.S. Navy's F-A-18 fighter jet program. And I hadn't been on the job for more than, let's say, 3 days when an engineer came up to me, and I'm going to call him Rick, because his name's Rick. And he identified himself as being part of the weights and measurement department. Now, it turns out that the job of the weight and measurement department when you're working on a fighter jet aircraft is that they weigh everything. Every drop of oil, every bullet, every sticker that goes on that aircraft, they need a weight for. And the reason he'd come to me is because he knew that I worked in the mission computer group. And apparently Rick had been doing a little bit of homework. What Rick had discovered is that when the company bought mission computers, they came unloaded. Then my department was loading up the mission computers with software, and then the mission computers were being put onto the aircraft. So Rick had a very simple question. How much did my software weigh? And by the way, Rick wasn't going away until he got an answer. What do you do when you're confronted with an idiot? So, I went to my boss, who was an older engineer and much wiser than me, and I explained my dilemma to him. And he stroked his chin for a little bit, thought about it. He said, hey, I've got an idea. Now, we got to go back in time a little bit here, folks. Oh, come on, you recognize it. The entire program for this mission computer could be printed out on a set of computer cards. Forget your flash drives, forget your floppy disk, boys. We're going back in time here, okay? So my boss printed out an entire deck of our program. And then he took the deck and he threw it away. And he went to the back of the printer machine. And there was like a little basket that would catch the little chad that got poked out. And he gave me the little basket. He said, go weigh this. So I went down the hall to the mailroom. You do remember the mailroom, right? And it turns out that they weigh roughly like about 2 ounces. I called up Rick. I said, hey, turns out the software weighs 2 ounces. He says, fantastic. And I never saw him again. So I guarantee you, somewhere in this world, there's an operating manual for the U.S. Navy's F-A-18 that indicates that if the mission computer is loaded with software, the aircraft weighs 2 additional ounces. So I live in Tampa, Florida. And so in IEEE speak, I am a member of Region 3. In Region 3, we recently lost one of our most valuable members. George McClure passed on at age 79. Now, I knew George, and George was a great guy. He had lived a full life and he passed on at home. Although it's always sad to lose a friend, that's not what I want to talk to you about today. Instead, if you and I want to change the world, then I would like to offer up George as an example for all of us to follow. Although George lived to be 79, it sure doesn't seem like he really had enough time to accomplish everything that he did. Now, he had a long and successful career in the aerospace field, okay? But that's not what I want to talk to you about today. The reason is because nobody really remembers George for what he did on the job. Instead, what George is really remembered for is what he did as a member of the IEEE. If anyone has ever passed on in your part of IEEE, you know what happens next. You start getting a bunch of emails that talk about what the person was able to accomplish. When George passed on, I started getting those emails, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. George's IEEE accomplishments went on and on. Look at all that he accomplished. George was a Region 3 director. George ran for the presidency of the IEEE USA the very first year that it was created. George was active in 3 different IEEE organizations: the Life Member Organization, the Career Development Organization, and the Communication Organization. George was an IEEE Fellow, and remember, only 1% of the total membership is eligible to be a Fellow. Okay? George became a Life Fellow, and George, in 1999, was awarded the IEEE USA's highest honor. What George McClure is remembered for is not what he did while he was working, but rather for the lives that he touched while he was a member of the IEEE. Now, one of the emails that I received after George had passed on said that you could go to a website and leave a personal remembrance of George. And I can remember thinking to myself, now, who would do that? I mean, George is never going to read it. So, eventually this bugged me so much that I had to go to the website. Now, much to my amazement, I discovered that 62 people had not only visited the website, but George had made such an impression on their life that they had felt compelled to leave a remembrance. 62 people. This got me to thinking. If I dropped dead today, and if a memorial website was set up for me, how many people would come? How many people would leave a notice? So I talked to my wife. She assured me, should this happen, she would visit my website. And that she would leave a message on my website. Now that made me happy because that's 61 to go. But then I started thinking, what kind of message would she leave? I have a feeling it would be a list of everything I promised to do, but never got around to accomplishing. So it became very clear to me that I have not yet found a way to change the world. Now George did, and he's my hero. I want to change the world like George McClure did. My question to you today is, how are you going to leave your mark on the world? Getting someone else to tattoo your name onto their skin does not count. Rather, when your time is up and you're gone, how will the world be different for you having spent your time here? Now, this isn't something they teach us in school, and you can't go out to a store and buy a How to Change the World type of book. However, we are all engineers, and this is exactly the type of problem that we respond to. It's big, it's difficult, and it probably involves some math. We are engineers. That means we stand out in a crowd. When it comes to finding ways to change the world, we need to answer some fundamental questions. The first of these questions is if this world-changing stuff is something we can do by ourselves, or do we need the assistance of other people? And actually, the question is pretty easy to answer. If you think about the other people who have successfully changed the world, Gandhi, John F. Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Winston Churchill, they were great people. But it's not what they did that changed the world, but rather what they got other people to do that changed the world. So I'm sorry about this, wallflower engineers. If you're going to change the world, it looks like you're going to have to make it happen through other people. In fact, through a lot of other people. So let's talk about why you're here. Let's do some math. Your life can be broken up into 3 distinct phases. It takes us about 20 years to become an engineer. You're going to end up working for about 45 years, and with a little luck, you'll be able to enjoy about 20 years in retirement. What all this means is that if you truly want to change the world, you better hurry up. You don't have a lot of time left. If we can all agree that in order to change the world that you're going to have to make it happen through other people, then I want you to think about the role that your membership in the IEEE will play. Try to imagine if you had never joined the IEEE in the first place. Think of all the people that you would not have met. Think of all the events that you would not have gone to. In fact, you would not be sitting here today. What would you be doing instead? Probably sitting at home watching ESPN, drinking beer. But we're not going to talk about that. Now think about all the people that you've met through your membership of IEEE. Think of all the events that you've been to. Think of all the things that you've learned by reading Spectrum. You are a changed person because of this. Now, it turns out in the end, the IEEE really does need you to be a member. They need your fees. They need your participation. But on the same note, it turns out that you need the IEEE. It provides you with access to people and events you would not have access to otherwise. Now I'm going to tell you something that the IEEE mothership will never tell you. The IEEE is an engine. This engine runs on members. Not really, it's a metaphor, okay? They're not really there. Now I come from Florida and I can tell you, just like George McClure, we are always losing members when their time runs out. That means that each and every one of us has a responsibility to go out and get more fuel for the IEEE engine, more members to keep the engine going. When that engine is running, it can do great things. For example, this conference that we're attending today, the legislative activities that happen in DC on our behalf, the reports that are produced by IEEE USA, and of course, our ongoing support for the student organizations. Now I've got a question for you. When you're at home driving your car, when do you decide to refill the gas tank? I'm a half-empty sort of guy. When that needle gets to about halfway, I start looking for a gas station, which is ironic, because I married a woman who is constantly doing field studies on whether or not you can go 30, 40, or even 50 miles after the low fuel light turns on. The IEEE fuel gauge in the U.S. is starting to show us that it's time to pull in for a refuel. I've been told that only 7% of the eligible engineers in the U.S. are members of the IEEE. You know what that means, guys? It means that we're running on fumes most of the time. So in this life, if we're going to change the world, then the first question that you're going to have to deal with is to start to figure out what you really want to accomplish. One of the first things that you need to start to do is to read obituaries. Obituaries are like short biographies of people. If you're already reading them, keep reading them, of course. But what you're going to discover is that the people in this life who are the most successful generally have the most messed up lives. It's never a linear path from where they started to where they ended up. And people who have the most crooked paths generally end up in the most exciting places. Life is not a straight line. Yours should not be a straight line either. You need to watch out for buses. Somewhere out there, there is a bus with your name on it. There's always a possibility that one day you're going to end up being hit by that bus. What this means is both you and I are living on borrowed time. Nothing is certain, not even tomorrow. Don't take anything for granted. You always need to be asking yourself, would I regret spending my life this way if I got hit by a bus tomorrow? Also, we have to ask yourself the flip side of that question. Is the path that I'm on right now going to lead to a life I'm going to be happy with in 10 or 20 years, assuming I don't get hit by a bus first? Study after study show us that friends matter. In the end, the most important factors involved in both happiness and well-being involve your meaningful connections with other human beings. So here's a tough question for you. How many people who are in your lives right now were there 10 or 20 years ago? Probably even more importantly, how many people in your life right now will be there with you 10 or 20 years down the road? And finally, you are not a circus animal. Your boss is the only person who's going to throw you peanuts to perform. You should strive to do better. You have many different roles, including your involvement in the IEEE. understand that even in these roles, you may not get peanuts. However, these roles may turn out to be far more important to you in the long run. So now it brings an interesting question. How are you going to accomplish this? Wanting to change the world is a great thing to desire. Figuring out how you're going to actually accomplish it is a completely separate question. The very first thing that you need to do is to make the most of this weekend. The conference has been divided up into 3 tracks, and that means that you're going to have to do some picking and choosing. You can't go wrong with any of the decisions that you make. But you're going to need to make some decisions. Pick the sessions that are going to help your PACE section out in 2012 and into the first half of 2013. Next, you're going to have to make use of the resources that you've already been given. The good folks at IEEE PACE headquarters recently sent you an email that told you about 4 seminars in a box that they put together for you. Now please join me in placing your left hand over your heart and raising your right hand. You know, I can wait. Repeat after me. I commit to delivering 4 PACE modules that have been handed to me on a silver platter during 2012.
During 2012, the first half of 2013.
You did a very good job of that, thank you. Finally, if we're going to change the world, then we're going to have to connect with our audience. What this means for you is that you're going to have to take a very close look at exactly what you can do in each one of the PACE modules that you've been handed. Each module includes recorded webinars, PowerPoint presentations, ebooks, and articles. You have the basic building blocks of a successful PACE event. Now that's all that's left for you is to build a successful PACE event. Just because we are engineers does not mean that we always make the right decision. When it comes to putting on one of the 4 PACE events that we've been provided with, we may think that we can just grab and go. You could not be more mistaken. Now, I'm an engineer, but I work in marketing. There's nothing more dangerous than that, by the way. What this means is that I'm in a unique position to help you out in making sure that your next PACE event is a success. Remember that the more people that you can attract to your PACE event, then the more people that you'll be able to talk to about joining the IEEE and being able to keep the IEEE engine running. Now, the materials that the IEEE provides you with the 4 PACE modules should really be viewed as being, I don't know, unsigned gift cards, okay? They're nice, but until you personalize them, they won't have the full impact. Okay, you are a member of your local IEEE section, and what this means is that better than anybody else in the world, you know your members. You know their hopes, their dreams, their desires, and their wants. We don't have enough time today to dive into how to go about customizing these presentations to meet the needs of your unique section. However, I have taken the time to try and take a stab at it and show you how the resumes and cover letters PACE module could be enhanced in order to appeal to a wider audience. Now, in all honesty, I don't know exactly what it's going to take to appeal to the members of your section. So I went ahead and made a backup copy. Oftentimes I don't get asked back to speak, so. So I want you to imagine a future where you have been successful. What does that future look like? Well, in that future, you'll be able to solve a math problem. 3 + 100 equals $200. So the IEEE organization has made an offer to you during 2012. If you put on 3 PACE events, which, by the way, doesn't matter because you just committed to me to do 4. If you put on 3 PACE events and you schedule them through the vTools system, tool, application, and to your 3 events you attract at least 100 people, IEEE is going to give you $200. They're going to pay you for doing what you already promised me you're going to do. How cool is that? That's like found money. If you're able to put these events on, if you're able to get people to come, if you're able to attract people, if you're able to get people to join the IEEE, you will be successful. You will be well on your way to changing the world. And what that means is you will be one step closer to being like my hero. The person who I think is the greatest man who ever lived, Dr. Norman Borlaug. Now, you may not know him, but I want you to think about, how many times on TV have we seen the situation where the fireman raced into the house and pulled a child out of it? That's a hero. Or if the fireman raced in the house and pulled 2 children out, that's a superhero to us, right? Dr. Borlaug saved 1 billion lives. Okay, he was born in 1914 in rural Iowa. He attended a one-room schoolhouse. He put himself through college. His interest, his joy, what made him happy was hybrid crops. He developed better crops, crops that could grow in bad conditions, crops that were resistant to disease. In 1965, he was working in Mexico City when he discovered that there was a famine that was starting in Pakistan and India. He put together 35 trucks loaded with his best seeds, drove them up to the port of Los Angeles, and he and his assistants got on a boat and sailed for India. When they arrived, as is always the case in life, it turns out that war had broken out between Pakistan and India. So even as there was artillery flashes in the background, he and his teams were working in the fields, planting the first crop of their high-yield seeds. 3 years after he set foot in Pakistan, Pakistan was self-sufficient in wheat production. 6 years after he arrived, India was self-sufficient in all grains. Dr. Borlaug received the Nobel Prize for preventing the famine in 1970. All right, I'm just about done here. So quick shot of this. This is a driveway. It isn't actually my driveway, but it's very similar to a driveway that I had in South Florida. This is paver stone. If you've ever seen a paver stone driveway, they are very nice to have. I had a little problem with my paver stone driveway. I had weeds growing in it. A lot of different ways to solve that, but they could probably go out and pull out the weeds. You can spray them with poison, but I'm an engineer. I wanted to solve this problem once and for all, so I decided what I was going to do is I was going to put sand in between each one of those little bricks. If there's sand there, then you can have weeds. Solve the problem forever. So I whipped out the phone book, looked for people who sold sand. Turns out in South Florida, there's a lot of companies that do sell sand. That was fantastic. We picked up the phone, talked to them, called them, and said, hey, I'd like to order some sand. They said, fantastic. How much sand would you like? It's a big driveway. They said, we'll sell by yards. A truck is 3 yards. I think I can do more than that. But we'll start with a truck. They said, fine, okay. Truck showed up and brought the sand off. So here's the interesting thing I realized after the sand was dropped off. I was thinking in 2 dimensions. They were thinking in 3 dimensions. That was much more sand than I actually needed. And of course they dumped it down the driveway, and of course both cars were in the garage at the time. Just to round things out, it turns out that you really don't need that much sand to seal a driveway. Probably 2 buckets. I spent the next week or so hiding sand all over my yard. Lesson from this story is that if you're getting ready to change the world, engineers always need to double check their units. All right, I'm almost done, but before I wrap up, let's talk about you. If you really want to be like my friend George McClure and change the world, then you've got to get busy. Time's running out, and you've got a lot to do. You can make a difference, and you can be remembered long after your time on this planet is over. The first thing that you need to do when you get back home is to commit to holding more PACE meetings. Simply by committing to take this first step, you will have a positive impact on the lives of your section's PACE members. The second thing that you need to do if you want to change the world is to make sure that every person who comes to one of your PACE meetings is presented with an opportunity to join the IEEE. Your meetings will provide you with an opportunity to reach out to people who are interested in attending your meetings and who may be interested in joining the IEEE. And remember, people who join the IEEE, they are the fuel that will keep the IEEE engine running for a long time. Finally, you need to change the world. By being involved in the IEEE and making sure that your section's PACE group is active, you will have made it possible for you to do this. Congratulations. The world is yours